Welcome to This Explainer. If you spend any time consuming financial advice online these days, you're probably used to a very specific, kind of sensationalized formula. It's usually all about the relentless hustle, accumulating infinite cash, and showing off flashy material wealth. But today, we're exploring a completely different, highly pragmatic, and honestly, surprisingly philosophical approach. We're going to unpack the mindset of billionaire Nikhil Kamath, the co-founder of Zerodha and True Beacon, to really uncover his contrarian playbook for wealth, business, and life. To really hook you into how differently this guy thinks, just consider his living situation. Despite his immense wealth, Kamath actually lives in a beautiful home where he pays just a 2 to 3% rent yield. Basically, he pays a tiny fraction of the home's actual value to live there. For him, this proves that renting is just far cheaper than tying up massive amounts of capital in wildly expensive real estate. Because for him, the ultimate flex of wealth isn't buying a bigger, better house, it's valuing time and autonomy over material accumulation. It's about waking up every day and having the ultimate freedom to choose exactly who you want to work with. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with number 1, the true definition of money. Then, 2, the contrarian investing playbook. 3, disrupting wealth management. 4, the case against crypto. And finally, number 5, the randomness of success. All right, let's kick things off with section 1, the true definition of money. Before we can even talk about how to invest, we really have to challenge our preconceived notions of what it actually means to be truly wealthy. Kamath argues that material goods inevitably suffer from the law of diminishing returns. Think about it. You buy something nice, you get used to it pretty quickly, and soon you just want something better. It's an endless treadmill. So true financial independence is simply a reflection of your time. The absolute ultimate advantage of having money is the power it gives you to reclaim your calendar and the freedom to confidently say no to a job or a project that you simply don't want to do. Moving right along to section 2, the contrarian investing playbook. Let's speak directly to the 24 to 27-year-olds out there. Let's say you're earning around 12 lakhs a year, and you are really hungry to build a solid financial foundation. Well, the very first step Kamath advises actually isn't about picking the perfect stock. It's about what he calls geographic arbitrage. I mean, why pay massive metro city rent when you could work remotely from a tier 2 town and just pocket the difference? By moving back in with your parents or relocating to a cheaper area, you drastically lower your cost of living. You strip away that super expensive proximity to a physical office, and that allows you to absolutely maximize your savings rate in those really crucial early years. Now, what's really interesting about this next point is what you do once you've actually saved that money. Kamath's recommended asset allocation is shockingly conservative. We are constantly told, right, that in your 20s, you should dump like 80% of your portfolio into high-risk equities because, well, you have the time to ride out the market. But take a look at his approach. Only 25% in equity, 35% in low-risk assets like gold and fixed income, and a massive 40% in liquid savings and some real estate. This completely, utterly defies the standard advice given to 20-somethings today. So you might be wondering, why on earth be so conservative when you're young? Well, Kamath warns that Indian investors are suffering from massive recency bias. We are basically jaded by an incredible 30-year bull run where the Indian stock market index, the Nifty, grew at an average of 14.6%. We haven't really seen a true generational market crash. But if you look at global history, prolonged 20-year bear markets are a very real, very painful thing. True wealth isn't just about capturing explosive growth in a single lucky year. It's about remaining solvent through long, brutal market cycles. Let's be real for a second. If you have 80% in stocks and the market suddenly drops 50%, the sheer absurdity of watching half your net worth vanish overnight might just scare you away from investing forever. Conservatism keeps you in the game. Okay, let's zoom out a bit for section 3, disrupting wealth management. It's really fascinating to step back from personal finance and see how Kamath applies this exact same contrarian, fairness-driven logic to his own business ventures, specifically his hedge fund, True Beacon. The disruption is glaringly obvious when you compare the fees. The global standard for traditional hedge funds is the classic 2 and 20 model. Managers charge a 2% fixed fee on your total assets plus a 20% cut of the profits. This basically means the fund managers make a massive amount of money even if you, the client, actually lose money. Kamath looked at that and deemed it deeply, deeply unfair. So, True Beacon disrupted this by implementing a 0 and 10 model. 0 fixed management fees and only a 10% performance fee. The fund literally only makes a dime if the client actually turns a profit. Talk about a game changer. Just to ground this in reality for a second, these alternative investment funds are highly exclusive. The absolute minimum investment required to even enter a fund like this in India is 1 crore rupees.
But here's what you should really take away from this. That high minimum isn't just about keeping the average person out. From a purely operational standpoint, managing 1 crore under True Beacon's highly generous 10% performance fee only yields the company about 8,000 rupees a month in revenue. That is definitely not enough to pay for teams of Harvard PhDs to manage the portfolio. You need immense scale. However, Kamath points out that the real systemic barrier preventing the broader retail public from accessing great wealth management is actually ambiguous, highly complex taxation across all these various investment vehicles. That's the real headache for the industry.
Next up, Section 4, the case against crypto. And this brilliantly illustrates Kamath's broader worldview. Operating in a highly regulated landscape gives him a very specific, and I mean highly skeptical view on Web3 and cryptocurrencies. He is an absolute no on investing in crypto, and he outlines 3 very impartial arguments for this. First, unlike the gold standard of the past, there is literally no underlying intrinsic asset backing it up. He likens belief in cryptocurrency to a religion that relies purely on faith that the broader ecosystem will eventually accept it. Second, there's the massive energy and efficiency required to mine it. And third, it's a regulatory nightmare. In a world where you don't truly know who is on the other side of a peer-to-peer transaction, it creates this massive gray area ripe for illicit use cases, like purchasing weapons entirely anonymously. Now, actually, scratch that. He's not a no on everything in that space. It's important to contrast his hard pass on cryptocurrency with his nuanced optimism for the broader Web3 space. He actually sees clear future utility in things like the metaverse. For example, he presents this highly counterintuitive idea. The metaverse could radically solve the planet's carbon and travel problems. Think about it. If virtual reality gets so incredibly good that we don't need to physically drive or fly to meetings anymore, the positive impact on the environment could be staggering. Which brings us to our final act, Section 5, the randomness of success. Imagine you have achieved literally everything financially. You're left with one massive existential question. Why do we do what we do? Kamath leans heavily into psychology here. He brings up the philosopher Camus, noting that if you question anything in life for long enough, a career, a relationship, it'll inevitably start to appear meaningless. To avoid the sheer despair of that realization, humans constantly have to deceive themselves. We kind of have to invent meaning in our daily grind just to stay happy and keep putting one foot in front of the other. And honestly, part of that philosophical outlook is a remarkably humbling reality about wealth building. We all love to take credit for our big wins, right? We think it's purely our raw hard work and intellect. But Kamath argues that hitting those major career milestones is overwhelmingly dictated by the biological and geographic lottery of your birth. As bleak as it sounds, it's really the sheer luck of being born into a family that could afford basic vaccines and schooling at the exact right moment in history. He embraces this randomness entirely. He flat out acknowledges that you have very little control over the outcomes of tomorrow. So, how exactly does a billionaire find comfort in this kind of existential dread? Well, by choosing his company very carefully. Rather than relying on sterile, purely corporate hires, Kamath builds his massive businesses alongside his brother Nitin and childhood friends from his neighborhood, like Venu and Karthik. Surrounding himself with lifelong friends forms this protective hedge against the meaninglessness of the corporate grind. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought. If the odds of extreme financial success are mostly random, and material wealth eventually suffers from diminishing returns anyway, how will you choose to define your own meaningful life today? Will you just chase a number, or will you use whatever resources you have right now to reclaim your time and surround yourself with people you actually love? It's a question that really forces us to completely reevaluate our relentless pursuit of money. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you on the next one.